So Greg Bailey has indicated, see if the slide thing there, forward statement. And if we could do the video, please.
We're born. We're on the clock. At first, we have all the time in the world to do anything we can imagine. But the older we get, the more time weighs on us. Our bodies and minds start to fade. The world sees us differently. We feel our time is running out. But what if we could slow down the clock? If we could stay healthier longer, would we change our plan for tomorrow? Would we spend more time with our families today? What would we do with more life in our lifetime? At Juvenescence, we're on a mission to find out. We're creating a community of people who refuse to let age define us. We're fueling their brightest ideas, developing revolutionary therapies, and getting them into the right hands. Together, we're not just reimagining what it means to get older. We're reimagining the possibilities of a lifetime. So what would we do with more life? Let's find out.
So the reason we show that is the minute you're born, I'm glad we started with the toddler, we start to age. How do we begin to influence things even very early on? So one of the things we've tried to do at Juvenescence is, first step is we created an app. And the app will make recommendations as far as nutrition, exercise, diet, with also looking at your cardiovascular status, your mental status, because obviously that's a huge issue that's sort of gone unmet. So our goal is to begin to work with people who are healthy to start with, and as early as possible. And then the other thing that we've done, because our focus is on health and prevention, I see us as a 21st century biotech company because of the element of social media and also this element of moving to prevention as opposed to current therapies in most of pharmaceutical companies where you get the disease and we try to treat it or hopefully cure it. So the goal is healthy, increasing your health span, the discrepancy between when you die and when you were last healthy. On average in the developed world, it's 10 years, which means some people are unwell for 20 years. How do we make that a week, a day? Wouldn't that be spectacular? And if you do that, you're probably going to increase lifespan as well, but that's not the primary focus. We'd like to begin the journey early. So there's things you can do today that will modify how you age. And I think it's going to start in 3 areas. One that Nir's doing with repurposing drugs like metformin. I think there's probably 100 other drugs that are used for a pathology, but definitively would slow aging or modify aging. I actually think that rebalancing hormones is going to become very prevalent. And it's something we should look at in the area of juvenescence or in the anti-aging. And the last thing, and this has been a bit of a shock, because when we put this together with Jim and Dec, it was all about drug development. That's our background. But we were surprised to see that a number of the scientists actually had IP-protected products with rigorous science that would modify aging, and they were safe. So we could get them on the market in under 3 years. We launched our first major product 2 days ago on Amazon, and I'll discuss it. It's a drug that's got rigorous science behind it as to how it would modify aging. And there's a flow between our 2 divisions, because we've got the drug division, which also has Regeneration under Therapeutics, and then we have a consumer division called JuvLife, and they ebb and flow between the 2 of them. So our first product, this one that we launched on Amazon, an analog of it might work for something called HEPA, heart failure, which is an unmet clinical need in heart failure. And our drug developers are working very carefully. We're bringing pharma standards to the supplement industry. And what I mean by that is, before we take something on, we have to see it as a potential drug-like quality. The second thing is we want to know the mechanism of action, which is really important when you're doing pharmaceutical development. The next element that you want to know is the IP is bulletproof, that it's really solid IP that you're working on. And you want a biomarker, which James mentioned earlier. So important if we're going to be doing something in anti-aging that we give you the product and we have a biomarker that demonstrably indicates that it's actually doing what it says. Because we're not waiting 75 years to see if you age slower or not. Jim, who's behind the Master Investor and integral in the Longevity Forum with James, and actually wrote a book on the subject called Juvenescence, which I recommend you buying, and if you do, all the money goes to charity. Declan Dugan was former head of drug development at Pfizer, worked with him for 12 years. His strike rate since he's left Pfizer, as far as finding drugs, is amazing. They're not all getting through to the finish line, but as far as monetizing them, he's been remarkable. And we've had the good fortune of creating over $25 billion, 20 billion pounds sterling in market share. So we've done very well for our shareholders and our stakeholders. If you are going to invest in whatever company in biotech, there's a bunch of things you want. It's an odds game. You know, you have a 1 in 3 chance of having a successful phase 2 clinical trial. If you only bet once, that means you got a 66% chance of failure. If you bet 10 times, then the metrics work out to your favor. Our goal, like James, is to do 10 products, be right on 2 or 3. If we do that, we deliver an extraordinary return for our shareholders and for our stakeholders and employees. How do you do that? You want to have an amazing team, and hopefully we'll demonstrate that we have a quality, world-class science team and drug developers. It's great if they've also done it before. Then the pipeline I mentioned, and then multiple ways to monetize this. And this can be everything from licensing, particularly in Juvenescence cases. We're never hiring 10,000 sales reps, so we're always going to be licensing a major pharmaceutical product. But it could be publicly listed. We will look at potentially listing some of our entities underneath this. And obviously, we can look to external financing. Where's the most optimum place to finance the company? This is an important slide because I talked about wanting to be on this journey with you from the day you're born. How do we integrate it into your life? So we got JuvLife down the bottom. It's not nearly as big as the pharmaceutical. If we have what we're hoping to have with the pharmaceuticals, which is an on-off switch for obesity, weight gain or weight loss, and a rheumatoid arthritis drug that competes with the biologics, we're a multi-billion-dollar company. But we're starting with the consumer. And we've launched that first product, Metabolic Switch. It's a ketone ester, and I'll go into it in a minute. But they feed into each other, and there's also a timeline to this. Today, you can start taking that product. Today, you can start modifying your aging. And then you get the therapeutics coming and drugs. And then next, we have Regeneration, which I'm going to show you some things, which also, as James said, is working on. It's a super exciting field. The last thing I mentioned was the banks are way ahead of investors. You can see that Citibank says it's one of the top 10 most disruptive technologies of this decade. Bank of America says it's a $500 billion industry in 5 years. Like James, we have a comprehensive portfolio. These are just the near-term ones that are going to be going into the clinic in the near term, and the non-pharmaceutical products will launch over the next 2 to 3 years. Very important, again, if you're investing in biotech, you want inflection points, meaningful inflection points where you invest, you have enough money to get through them, and you're actually going to make a material difference in the valuation of your company. And these are our near-term valuation points. I mentioned there's a number of ways we can monetize: public listing, licensing to big pharma, or Nestle's in the case of something like a supplement, and external financings. So this is our team. Deck, former head of drug development at Pfizer. David was the vice chairman of the Correct Science Committee, but he also was head of European R&D for Pfizer. Grazia is so imaginative, comes from Merck and Novartis, our chief science officer. Stephen Felstad is the former head of clinical drug development at Pfizer. And then down the end, we have Jeff Modweb, who joins us from Merck, who's just a fantastic project manager. This is obviously a little bit disingenuous. You know, we did not create all of these. They're clearly team efforts, but the people on our drug development team were involved in all of these. And why is that important? Because aging is not simple. It's very diverse. It's inflammation, it's fibrosis, it's a number of other pathologies. So to have this breadth of knowledge across these pharmaceuticals is really important. Some of you may have seen this yesterday at Oxford University. Michael Hufford presented this. We can do transplants. We can do liver, kidney, pancreas. Problem is, we don't have enough liver, kidneys, or pancreases. So what Eric Lagasse and Michael did, which is incredibly clever in my mind, was they took a cadaver liver that was going to be thrown out. They divided it into 75 aliquots. They proliferated it, and they injected under laparoscope into the lymph nodes. And what was extraordinary when we did our diligence is the lymph nodes begin to act like secondary livers. They actually respond to exactly the same body signals, GI signals, as your liver does. They've recreated an organ. It starts a clinical trial at Mass General in the next few weeks. This is the first step in our regeneration. I mentioned that it's going to be down the line. It's the third box that I had on that colored slide. But actually, this is the beginning of it. It can be used in other organs as well. What if we took pancreatic cells and we injected them into the lymph nodes that drain into the pancreatic duct? Could we reverse type 1 diabetes? What if we manipulated the cells so that they produced a drug, put it in the lymph node, and they respond to exactly the same body signals as a normal organ would, and they put out that drug exactly when you need it? It needs to be immunosuppressed because this is a cadaver liver. What's been the dream for stem cells? It's always been that you're going to have these one-day-old cells. You're going to inject them into the body. They're going to graft, beat as one. It can be cardiac tissue. It can be brain. Problem is there's 3 different types of stem cells. There's the embryonic, and the problem with embryonic, unfortunately, is they can create a teratoma. And it's a benign tumor, but you don't want a teratoma in your heart. And then there's the pluripotent, which becomes all of the cells of your body primarily when you go from fetus to embryo. And then there's the adult stem cells, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's really a Band-Aid. It's there for 2 days, 2 weeks, and then they self-destruct. So that's not the solution. Wouldn't it be great if you took the cell lines and you had something that protected it from the immune system? Now you have a universal donor. So at every hospital in England, you could have the ability to take cardiomyocytes when somebody has a cardiac incident, inject it, it grafts with the heart, it beats as one. And we have a thing called HLA-G. It's what protects the fetus from the maternal immune system. And we're going to embed it on the cells to see if we can create this universal cell line or a transected spinal cord. So I can't wait to get your placenta, differentiate your stem cells to reanastomose your spinal cord. This was a shock when we saw this company. So basically, a child under the age of 7 who traumatically amputates their finger, but a bit of the nail bed is left. In 15 to 20% of cases, the finger will regrow. How does that happen? How do they talk to the cells, figure this out? Turn back on and become once again, create stem cells and grow. 2 professors, Levin and Kaplan, have figured it out. They find that it's ions that talk to each other. So when we first saw them, this is what they'd done. They amputated a frog's leg, which should not regrow a limb. It's not a salamander. And they tried the hydrogel, so that's what they're delivering their ions in. So they want to make sure the hydrogel just doesn't make the leg regrow. And then you can see with the ions, certainly not a perfect leg by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly substantially better than the previous efforts. Here's where we are now. This is now an amputated frog's leg. It looks pretty much like a frog's leg, but this is what's amazing. So what did we just see? Motor intact, sensory intact, bone, muscle, nerve, artery. They regrew a limb in a living entity that should not regrow a limb. Needless to say, we've given them more money to see if they can do it in a mammalian model. This was, again, a nice surprise. We thought we found an on-off switch for gaining or losing weight, which would be outstanding in anorexia, sarcopenia, obesity. It turns out it's a super family that's involved in so many different pathways: cancer, fibrosis. You can read it. I don't need to read it to you. So a variety of things. We have a wealth of opportunities. So with this opportunity, we're going to out-license some, and we'll develop other ones. And Margaret Jackson has been heading it, just done a magnificent job of moving it through preclinical. Rheumatoid arthritis, $42 billion markets. Some of the drugs are selling $6-7 billion a year. But they're biologics, expensive to make and not the easiest to take. If you have the same efficacy as those products and you are a small molecule, you will do brilliantly well. A company that Jim Deck and I started called Biohaven has a product for migraine. And basically, it is an oral agent, but there's also a biologic. And we're crushing them because people would much rather take a pill than an injection. and take it when they want as opposed to once a month. So we find out a readout on this one and whether it will be in the clinic next year or 2023 and whether it's as viable as the biologics, in which case, as I said, you have a multi-billion-dollar company. We also have a pipeline that I haven't shown to epigenetically prevent Alzheimer's and Parkinson's with MIT and Harvard. We have a senolytic, and we have the expert on senolytics here, Professor Kirkland. And we also are working on oral health. And I mentioned about our product that's used in consumers that actually can translate into HEPA heart failure. So that's BHBRX. It's out of the Buck Institute, 200 scientists working to try and eradicate aging. All of our products were tested on animals, and the animals lived longer, and it modified aging. So to start this division was as easy as hiring Andy Weatherly, who ran veterinary at Pfizer. We're already in talks with a number of domestic pet food companies to put our first product that launched on Amazon into dog food, because they live 25% longer, and it protected their heart and protected their brain. So I think this could be a $500 million sector. I think this is going to be another huge piece of the anti-aging story, is the translation backwards and forwards between animals and humans. So we have our life division. And this is an area that I didn't know very much about, but happily we've hired somebody who does. Huge sector, growing fast, 55 billion to 66 billion. If you have a product that's $100 million in gross revenue, it will sell, if you sold it to Nestle, it'll sell for 400 million. So if we can get 3 or 4 of our products to that level, you create a multi-billion-dollar company just off the supplements. I think this is going to be so much bigger than people think. If I told you for £2, $3, you have a product that may allow you to live 20% longer, you're going to take it all day. You know, I mean, and you give it to your family and friends, you give it at Christmas. So we had all these great drug developers. We had no one who had any expertise how to develop a product that was going to go to a consumer. I had the good fortune of being introduced to Colin Watt, who launched Splenda, literally launched Benecol, ran the Tylenol franchise, president of Weight Watchers, CEO of the second biggest vitamin retailer in the United States, the Vitamin Shop, who turned me down, said I'd never be able to afford him. But then he called me back and said, this is going to be an amazing area. I want to participate. And his boss is Tony Vernon, who sat on a press at a company that I sat on. And he said he was actually the guy who launched Splenda. You know, it wasn't like he was, you know, part of a team of 300. Todd Henges ran vitamin and supplements at Pfizer, great addition. Josh Anthony actually launched a nutritional app that sold. So he's accelerated our app that we're using, which will reinforce taking our product Metabolic Switch, which will give us all this incredible data and will allow me to start working with healthy people, but who still want to modify how they live. Joe McCarthy was the head of marketing and advertising at Nike and J&J. So again, an extraordinary addition because it's what he does. He's created, our first product is Metabolic Switch, then we're doing Cardio Switch, Cognitive Switch, and he's come up with the buzz term switch on. Not quite just do it, but a step in the right direction. And Terry Finachero is one of the top vitamin scientists in the United States. First product is that keg. I actually forgot to bring it up. I was going to have it here on the table with me. It's a powder, 2 scoops full of that, and we just ran the clinical trial. Within 15 to 30 minutes, you'll be in full ketosis. 0.5 to 1.5 is mild ketosis. Anything over that is full ketosis. You'll be 1.8 to 2.0, and you'll be there for 6 to 7 hours. Why is that important? Because your cells can use proteins, carbs, or ketones as an energy source. If you use ketones, they're the better energy source. A, they protect the cell, the cardioprotective, neuroprotective, but also they use 28 to 50% less oxygen. So they create 28 to 50% less free radicals, potentially. And they're the reason that your mitochondria and your cells begin to decay. So this actually could be a material thing. And we're going to be supporting a lot of clinical trials. I'm talking to a couple of people, including Nears, about putting their in lab, and Richard Siao. So that's launched. Next year, spermidine and hopefully sulforaphane. Spermidine works on a thinking cause autophagy, and it's very important. And sulforaphane, which was interesting, yesterday at the Oxford Geroscience Day, Professor Paul Shields talked about how important sulforaphane was in their aging studies. It's in broccoli, and unfortunately you have to eat a refrigerator full of broccoli to get an adequate dose. And so he said, if you have that, I will take it tomorrow. If you have a strong, vibrant sulforaphane, it plays such a role in aging. The last one is our highest risk, high reward. This is a product that stabilizes the cell membrane. So it may have a role in dementia and a bunch of other projects. If we can figure it out, we're working with the top guy in Australia on that product. I mentioned the app. You give us whatever data you're comfortable with. Don't give us data you don't want to give us. If you give us your VO2 max, if you give us your 24/7 blood sugar, we'll begin to make recommendations. So this will be actionable. Fitbit, or Apple Watch. I know that I haven't walked enough steps, so I know to do more. We're going to start to make recommendations. I'd also like to incorporate mental health. There's a few questions you can ask somebody to see if their mental health is decaying, well known in all sorts of psychological studies. And then you could alert their doctor, by the way, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Smith is faltering. It looks like they're getting depressed. You might want to call them in. We're also talking to Father Michael Collins about potentially doing something, again, where it could be someone who's faith-based needing to go see, the priest or someone to help them out if they're slipping. Very excited about this. And the data that we get from this is going to be extraordinary. You cease to be patients and consumers. Now you're participants. What I learned from this group may be able to help somebody else completely. Very excited about this division. So these are our various divisions that I've mentioned. JuvView, starting with healthy people. JuvLife, potentially starting with healthy people who want to try and change how they age. And then we go into the pharmaceutical products, rheumatoid arthritis, obesity, fibrosis, and then the ability, like Michael Hufford in the group, or Levin and Kaplan, where we regenerate tissue. Because even if I slow the cellular aging, going to James's presentation about the cellular damage and the molecular damage, you're still going to hurt your knee skiing or playing tennis, and it's going to bother you, and you don't want to end up in a wheelchair for the last 30 years of your life. So how do I regenerate that tissue? And this is coming. I don't know if it's 7 or 10 years, but it's actually coming, where we're going to be able to regenerate things, your organs with your organ. I said at the beginning, do a portfolio, have a world-class team, strong team, whether it's drug development or consumer, have multiple options for monetizing it, and just try to be right in 2 or 3, you'll deliver an extraordinary return. Thank you very much for your time.